The first thing I did after being reborn was to look for my bodyguard, Asher, in the small rental house. He pinned me against the corner and said, "What kind of tricks do you want to play this time?" I stood on tiptoe and planted a kiss on his lips. Later, I begged for mercy with tears in my eyes. But he leaned close to my ear, still full of desire, and said, "One more time and I'll let you go." Half an hour ago, I was reborn. The first thing I did after being reborn was to dress myself up to be seductive and go to Asher's rental house. Asher is my bodyguard and the son of my father's friend. I used to hate him and gave him a hard time. But my father didn't care. In order to drive him away, I even went so far as to climb into his bed and frame him. I walked through the messy and dirty alley and found Asher's rental house. The sun was setting, and he hadn't come home yet. So I had to squat in front of Asher's door and wait for him to come back. Awake? When I woke up, I was sleeping on the cloth sofa in the rental house. He had just taken a bath and was only wearing a pair of gray short sports pants. Beads of water, carrying heat, meandered down his strong and tense abdominal muscles. I swallowed hard, not being able to help myself. Seeing this, he sneered and said, "Scarlett, coming to me in the middle of the night. Is your fiancé not satisfying you?" The fiancé he mentioned was my first love. Back then. In order to push Asher away, Blake instigated me to climb into Asher's bed in the middle of the night and frame him. Asher. I was wrong. I walked towards Asher, deliberately finding an angle that could make my face look the most beautiful and looking at him. "What do you want to do this time?" His Adam's apple bobbed, and his eyes, with a dangerous glint, approached me. I raised my face, my eyes fluttering. I've known about Asher's feelings for me since the moment he stepped into the Scarlett family at the age of 18. In my previous life, I couldn't avoid him. But in this life, I'm desperately trying to get close to him. "Scarlett. This time you're the one who provoked me." He hugged me back and pinned me against the corner. The cold wall was pressed tightly against my face. My back, however, was painfully rubbed. Asher carried the cold fragrance of cedar after being exposed to the sun. Full of wildness and temptation, I turned around and clung to him. "It's me who took the initiative. So, are you willing?" Asher bent down towards me, his voice hoarse. I can't wish for more. The first time I saw Asher was in the alley behind the school. "Asher. I was wrong. Please forgive me. I won't dare do it again." A shrill scream from a man came from the alley. I looked over curiously. Asher had a cigarette in his mouth, and a large expanse of his wheat-colored pectoral muscles was exposed from his slightly open collar. He infuriately stepped on the man's palm. In the silence, the sound of finger bones shattering was clearly audible. I was so frightened that I panicked. The moment I ran away, he noticed me. His pitch-black eyes swept over me, dangerous and wild, like a panther eyeing its prey. The next day, he became my bodyguard. Asher appeared behind my father. The broken hair on his forehead covered his face, but I could feel the lustful look in his eyes. Blake could tell his feelings for me at a glance. "Scarlett. Your bodyguard is really disgusting. The way he looks at you is so naked. Does he have a crush on you?" I didn't dare to admit that I had a crush on him. Even under Blake's instigation, I framed him. That night, Asher didn't do anything. He just gently stroked a strand of my hair and sniffed it as if he were addicted. After I drove Asher away, my father was afraid that he would take revenge on me. So he agreed to the marriage alliance with the Blake family, hoping that Blake could protect me. But Blake married me just to get the Scarlett family's property. In the end, not only did Blake, together with his mistress, take away my family property, but I was also domestically abused. The moment my brains were beaten out, the blood stained my eyes red. He held his mistress in his arms and laughed wildly. "Scarlett. You stupid woman. Go to hell." The moment my soul was separated from my body, I saw Asher shooting the heads of my first love and his mistress. "Blake, you medkawalsai. I want you to accompany Scarlett to the grave." Asher, who was known as Asher among the powerful and wealthy in Zhongcheng, turned white-haired overnight that night. When I woke up, Asher was no longer by my side. Only clothes were scattered all over the floor. I huddled in the quilt, calculating how to stay here. Suddenly, Asher entered the room with newly bought clothes. Get dressed and go back by yourself. I looked at him lazily and had no intention of getting dressed. Seeing that I didn't move, Asher pulled me from the bed into his arms. And we were pressed tightly together. What? Didn't sleep enough? The corners of his lips curled up in a teasing smile. My face turned red. And I hugged him tightly, provoking him. Not enough. Asher's Adam's apple bobbed. And he was about to speak. A shrill phone ringtone sounded. It was a call from Blake. I quickly hung up. Asher looked at me with a gloomy face. Scarlett. It's time you went home. He helped me put on my clothes one by one. I deliberately opposed him and didn't cooperate at all. I don't want to go home. Asher's hand paused. And his words were sarcastic. What? Had a fight with Blake and then came to sleep with me? Using me as a backup? He coldly left these words and slammed the door out. It seemed that he was extremely angry. When I returned to the Liu mansion, Blake had already come looking for me. A hypocritical smile was on his face as usual. Scarlett. Where were you last night? Why didn't you answer my call? I ignored him and went straight upstairs. Blake followed me and grabbed my hand. Scarlett. Why aren't you talking? During the struggle, he saw the marks all over my collarbone. Crazy look appeared in Blake's eyes. Scarlett. Who were you fooling around with last night? You fucking. He was about to raise his hand, but I grabbed his wrist. Blake. Our engagement is off. Don't bother me anymore. Maybe he didn't expect me to suddenly change from a weak and innocent girl to such a decisive one. Blake was stunned when he saw me. But soon, he came to his senses and put on a smiling face. Scarlett. Don't say angry words. How can our engagement be called off just like that? Why not? It was just a verbal agreement. You didn't really take it seriously, did you? I knew what Blake was afraid of. Compared with the Scarlett family, the Blake family was just a second-rate wealthy family. In my previous life, his family wanted to use the Scarlett family to break into the upper class. So they PUAED me and suppressed Asher. They didn't expect that Asher would later become a top-tier wealthy family in Zhongqing by himself. That's why Blake domestic abused me to take revenge on Asher. Now that I'm reborn, I want to nip his hopes in the bud. Blake panicked and grabbed my hand, with a flattering smile on his face. My dear Scarlett. If you don't marry me, who else will you marry? Everyone in the circle knows that mad dog Asher has his eyes on you. Who would dare to marry you? In my previous life, he exaggerated the fact that Asher was in love with me and spread it everywhere. I couldn't stand to gossip and was too afraid to face Asher's sincere feelings. Scarlett. Only I dare to marry you. We grew up together. I'll be good to you. As Blake spoke, he bent down to kiss me. I felt sick to my stomach and slapped him. Blake, stay away from me. A bright red fingerprint was left on his face. Scarlett. You bitch. After being slapped, Blake finally stopped pretending. He viciously grabbed my neck. Scarlett. Aren't you disgusting? Being with a mad dog. Just when I was about to suffocate, Asher's cold voice came from behind. Blake, let go of your dirty hands. Asher kicked Blake to the ground with one kick. I didn't care about the pain in my neck and kicked him a few more times before I stopped. After taking a bath, Asher helped me deal with the injury on my neck. Does it hurt? He looked at my fair neck with tender eyes, on which were the marks he left last night. I nodded obediently, put my arms around his shoulders, and said with a coquetry, "Hudding fulfilled wide sigh. Asher. It hurts." Asher's long and powerful fingers pinched my chin, and his eyes were full of inquiry. Scarlett. Do you know this is very dangerous? I chuckled in his ear. Of course I know. Asher's eyes darkened, and he gently pushed me away. His expression was tolerant and forbearing and restrained. Don't make trouble. You still have an injury on your neck. I wanted to tease him further, but he stopped me. He gently kissed my forehead. Be good and sleep well. That night, I slept extremely soundly. When I woke up in the morning, He was still holding me in the same position as last night. I pumped his abdominal muscles, and was just about to speak when a rapid knock on the door came from outside. Asher. Get out here. It was my father. When the door was pushed open, my father looked at Asher with a face full of anger. It seemed that Blake had told my father everything about Asher and me. My father was very angry and immediately ordered people to tie Asher up. His hands were tied behind his back, and his muscles were tense as he knelt on the ground. The thick black broken hair on his forehead covered his eyes, and only his clear and sharp jawline could be seen. Aunt Xiao didn't dare to stop him and only asked me cautiously. Scarlett. Don't be afraid. Tell Auntie. Did Asher bully you? I shook my head and looked at them firmly. Dad. And Asher. Asher didn't bully me. I took the initiative. Hearing this, Asher looked up at me. My father was so angry that his eyes turned red, and he pointed at me, trembling. Scarlett. Do you know what you're saying? I know. I'm very clear. Dad. I like Asher. I want to marry him. I knelt beside Asher and begged my father. Aunt Xiao was shocked. But you said before. She wanted to say that I had framed Asher for forcing me before. My father interrupted her. He pointed at me and Asher. You too. Get out of here. My father was in a fit of anger. So I didn't argue with him. Asher took me back to his rental house. When we entered the room, I found that he had washed and hung up the clothes I left before. The summer wind blew, and my clothes were intertwined with his. Inseparable. I followed him closely, not daring to say a word. Asher suddenly stopped and turned around, and I bumped into his broad and strong chest. Scarlett. Are you serious? He looked at me with burning eyes, and the moonlights softened his features. I deliberately teased him and asked with a puzzled look. What do you mean by serious? Asher. You mean? Asher's eyes were deep, and he picked me up by the waist and threw me onto the sofa. I heard you just now. You said you wanted to marry me. His voice was numbingly hoarse, making my mind go blank. When I woke up the next day, my phone was flooded with news related to the Liu family's daughter seducing the bodyguard. The Liu family's daughter seducing the bodyguard, the turbulent life in the wealthy family. The whistleblower also released a video. In the video, I was wearing a black lace nightgown, showing off my perfect figure. My slightly curly long hair was spread like a waterfall around my waist. I twisted my waist and climbed onto Asher's bed. This was the scene when Blake instigated me to frame Asher. I didn't expect him to secretly film the video. The comments below were all filthy words scolding me. This woman is so cheap, climbing into a man's bed while he's drunk. Is she that horny? The upper class circle is really chaotic. If I were that bodyguard, I'd be disgusted to death. Maybe he's quite happy about it. That figure is really TSK. Asher took the phone from my hand. Scarlett. Don't look. I smiled inferiorly. It doesn't matter. I really did seduce you anyway. Asher rubbed my hair and said seriously. I'll handle it. Blake found me soon. Scarlett. Look how easy it is for me to ruin you. I held the coffee cup, looking down and remaining silent. He was right. It was easy to ruin someone. As long as you promise to marry me as planned, I'll overlook what happened between you and Asher. Of course. You'll be a full-time housewife after marriage. Blake kept chattering on, seemingly certain that I would agree. I looked up and stared at him with a faint, mocking smile. What if I say no? He was slightly taken aback. Scarlett. You don't have a choice. Why? Because only I will love you. You slandered Asher. Do you really think he'll still love you? He just wants to take revenge on you. There was an arrogant and rampant look in Blake's smile. Splash. I splashed the coffee in Blake's face. You're wrong. Not everyone is as disgusting as you. I stood up, gracefully wiped the places he had touched with a handkerchief, and left without looking back. In this life, I won't let Blake succeed. Due to the seduction gate incident, the stock price of the Liu Corporation plummeted. It reached rock bottom in less than 2 days. The shareholders were extremely dissatisfied and demanded that my father come up with a solution. My father, in order to protect me, had been under pressure from all sides but didn't call me to the company. However, I came uninvited. On Monday, at the regular high-level meeting of the Lu Group, my father sat at the head, looking fatigued, while a group of shareholders below were discussing the matter between me and Asher. I pushed the door open, wearing a capable silver gray suit. "Dear uncles, I'm sorry. I've made you worried." Everyone was astonished. Why are you here? "I'm also a major shareholder of the Lu Corporation. Why can't I come?" There was no fear on my face. Having been reborn, I was no longer the delicate flower in the greenhouse who needed her father to clean up every mess. "You still have the nerve to come after causing such a scandal?" A fat man pointed at me and questioned. I knew him. He had a close personal relationship with the Blake family. "Is it a scandal to like a bodyguard? Then isn't it a scandal that you raped your sister-in-law?" I had made thorough preparations before coming, but I didn't expect that Blake was also there. "Scarlett, how can you talk to Asher's father like that? He's also thinking about the company." I glanced at him. "Blake, what at a sigh. This is a meeting of the major shareholders of the Lu Corporation. With only 3 of the shares in your hand, you don't seem to have much say." His face turned pale, and he tried to save face. "I'm attending on behalf of my father." I sneered. "Since you can't represent yourself, shut up." Unexpectedly, I was so assertive. The other shareholders looked at each other in dismay and stopped speaking to avoid getting into trouble. After all, 60 of the shares of the Scarlett family were in the hands of my father and me, while the others combined had only 40. I promised the shareholders. First, I'll find the source of the video release and file a lawsuit. Second, I'll make the stock price recover within 3 days. On the same day, I held a press conference. I believe everyone is very concerned about the truth of the Seduction Gate incident. Today, I'm here to answer your questions in person. The reporters asked sharp questions, and I answered them all. The video was real. And it's also true that I like my bodyguard, who is no blood relation to me. As soon as I said this, the whole audience was in an uproar. After a long while, a female reporter stood up. "Miss Scarlett, I admire your courage to love and hate. But are you serious about being with the bodyguard?" I smiled and replied politely, "Thank you for your concern. I don't think it's disgraceful to fall in love with a bodyguard." The reporter was slightly taken aback and then said, "I hope you can succeed in pursuing your love." Since it was a live broadcast, the live streaming room was already crowded with people. Seeing this scene, they were all talking about it. "Is she crazy? She actually admitted to seducing someone in public. Am I the only one who thinks the elder sister is so cool? Her fearless attitude towards love is really awesome. Suddenly, I kind of like her. What should I do? Sister, kill me." With her taking the lead, more reporters began to show their support, and the questions became more and more friendly. I not only answered questions related to the video but also explained the future development of the Lu Corporation, restoring the confidence of the stockholders in the Lu Corporation. The whole press conference was not as thrilling as I had imagined. Even if there were discordant voices, kind-hearted reporters would divert the topic. It was so smooth that I was suspicious. After the press conference, the stock price of the Lu Corporation began to rise. The online public opinion was also one-sidedly praising me and denouncing the person who released the video. Subsequently, Asher gave me the source of the video release and the IPs that had incited netizens to slander the Lu Corporation. "Do whatever you want with them." When he said this, there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. It seemed that he still thought I had feelings for Blake. Whether in my past life or now, I've only liked him all along. I handed the evidence to the police. Blake was fined and detained for slander. The company's senior management voted to remove Blake from all his positions in the Lu Corporation, and his father was also prohibited from attending the major shareholder meetings. Later, I asked Asher. "The reporter who asked the first question at the press conference was arranged by you, right?" He was slightly stunned for half a second and then said, "You noticed? I was afraid you couldn't handle those people." Sure enough, Asher was still the same as in my past life, always planning for me silently behind the scenes. I couldn't help but hug him. Asher, I'm sorry. I remembered the night I slandered him in my past life. That day was my 18th birthday coming-of-age ceremony. Asher was drunk with a lot of alcohol. While he was drunk, Blake and I sneaked into his room. In the moonlight, he lay on the bed. Looking up, I approached him cautiously. But then I heard his murmur. "Scarlett. Scarlett." I was bewitched by his soft and hoarse voice. I wanted to run away. But he reached out and pulled me onto the bed. The wild, cold fragrance of cedar mixed with the smell of alcohol rushed straight to my nose. He pinned me down. At that moment, I was scared. I called for help from Blake. But he had already disappeared. Asher seemed to sense my fear. His eyes were blurred. In the end, he just blushed and gently kissed my hair. Then lifted my hair to his nose and sniffed it. "Scarlett. This must be a dream. Right? I'll wait for you. Wait for you to like me." He held me in his arms and whispered tenderly. "But I slandered him together with Blake. He didn't defend himself and let my father beat and scold him and drive him out of the Scarlett family." Facing my sudden hug and apology, Asher's body suddenly stiffened. He said softly, "It's my fault. From the first time we met, I had improper thoughts." In the following days, Asher and I were very happy together. My father still wouldn't forgive me. But the stock price of the Lou Corporation kept soaring. Asher and I tacitly stopped talking about family matters. We went shopping and dated like ordinary lovers. Unexpectedly, I suddenly received a text message. "Scarlett, do you think you're the only one who was reborn?" I didn't know who sent the text message. But I wanted to know the sender's purpose. So I hired a temporary bodyguard to go to the appointment. I thought the temporary bodyguard would be of some use. But he fainted even before me. "Long time no see. Scarlett." A cold female voice sounded. And Zhao Ling walked towards me with ill intentions. Zhao Ling was Blake's mistress in my past life. Unexpectedly, she was also reborn. "Do I know you?" According to the timeline of my past life, I didn't know her at this time. "Stop pretending. I know you were also reborn." Zhao Ling walked towards me. Her eyes filled with resentment. "Also? So she was reborn too. But why did she kidnap me? Was it for Blake?" I stopped pretending. "Yes, heading for Thilwag Sasher. I was reborn. So what do you want to do?" Hearing this, Zhao Ling smiled. "Nothing much. Just exchange lives with you." It sounded interesting. "How do we exchange?" She approached me, her eyes lingering on my face. "Kill you and then take your place." Seeing the doubt in my eyes, Zhao Ling chuckled. "You don't think I really liked that fool Blake, do you?" Sure enough, it was as I thought. Blake was just a fool being used. In my past life, Zhao Ling appeared after I married Blake. That time, Asher snatched the land that Blake had long coveted. Blake urgently needed the right to use that land and asked me to beg Asher. Asher left with me, leaving her behind. Later, she climbed into Blake's bed, became his mistress, and tortured me with him. I always couldn't figure out why she would give up such an excellent Asher and choose that scumbag Blake. Now I knew. She just wanted to take revenge on me and Asher. Zhao Ling lifted my chin with a dagger. "What I've always wanted is Asher." I turned my face away, ignoring her. I was calculating how long it would take for Asher to arrive. Before leaving, I informed Asher. Seeing that I didn't speak, she ordered her subordinates, before killing her, take some nice pictures for Asher. Two burly men with tatted arms came over and grabbed me. In the struggle, I bit one of their arms. The burly man slapped me, and my head buzzed. They started tearing at my clothes. Zhao Ling held her phone to take a video. "Harder. Tear it. Tear her dress to pieces." "You're crazy." Blake rushed out from somewhere and grabbed Zhao Ling. "Who the hell told you to find these people?" He kicked the burly man away and scolded Zhao Ling. Zhao Ling looked at him resentfully. "Blake. Don't forget. Kidnapping Scarlett was your idea. What are you pretending to be a good guy for now?" Blake defended himself. "I just told you to kidnap her, not to find someone to kill her." Zhao Ling sneered. "What's the difference?" Blake, you're really naive. If I didn't want to kill her, why would I kidnap her? You're a lunatic. The two were arguing when the door of the warehouse was blown open. Asher led people in and quickly subdued all of Xiaoling's subordinates. Seeing this, Xiaoling threw herself at Asher's feet and cried, "Asher, I didn't mean it. It was all instigated by this man. Don't be angry, okay?" Asher kicked her away without mercy. "Xiaoling, I'm not a fool. Asher, I knew you first. Why?" Asher remained silent. Xiaoling was almost hysterical, lying on the ground and crying. "You've been reborn too, right? In the previous life, I shouldn't have left you when you needed me the most. I regret it." Asher bent down and looked at Xiaoling with disgust. "You're wrong. Whether you left me or not, I wouldn't like you. From the very beginning, I was just acting." His words were extremely cold. It was the first time I saw him like this. Cold-blooded, ruthless, and emotionless. Blake was being held down on his knees. "Asher, do you dare to let Scarlett know your true face? You're a devil." "True face?" I looked at Asher. His eyes didn't flicker at all. He pointed the gun at Blake's crotch and said, "You've reminded me. I really am a devil." Bang! Asher held me in his arms, blocking my view. I only heard Blake scream. When I opened my eyes again, Blake had passed out. The ground was covered with bloodstains. I didn't know what had just happened. Asher carried me out of the warehouse. The news that Blake had kidnapped me quickly made it to the hot search. Netizens quickly dug up the incident of him releasing the video before. For a while, there was a public outcry across the internet, demanding a severe sentence. When Blake's father called me, Asher was also there. "Scarlett, I know Blake has wronged you. But you two grew up together. You don't want to see him go to jail, do you?" I answered without hesitation. "He deserves it." Seeing my firm attitude, Blake's father started to curse me crazily. "Scarlett, you bitch. Why don't you help Blake? Do you want him to die?" I replied, "Yes. I do want him to die." Then I hung up the phone resolutely. I'm no longer the Scarlett who could be easily pued. Asher chuckled and looked at me with bright eyes. "Scarlett, you're so charming like this." I was speechless and grabbed his collar. "Don't think that just because you praised me, I'll let you off. Be honest. What's the deal with Xiaoling?" Asher raised his head and kissed me on the jaw. "Before my father died, he was in charge of the entire underworld in China. Xiaoling's father was the second in command. I grew up with her." I raised my eyebrows and bit his ear. "Childhood sweethearts?" "Yeah. Are you jealous?" He smiled. I kissed his Adam's apple. "Go on." Asher let out a low sigh. "I always regarded her as my sister. After my father died, Xiaoling's father led all his subordinates to rebel. My mother had to take me and hide in Zhongcheng. Later, we were hunted down by our enemies. It was your father who saved my mother and me. She became an Annie in your family, and I became your bodyguard." I pinched his back hard and bit his lips. "What about the rebirth thing?" Xiaoling had said that Asher had also been reborn that day. "Yes, Ted info so wide search. I was also reborn. Because of my obsession with you in the previous life, I managed to find a master. So it was because of Asher that I could be reborn. Then why didn't you come to me and tell me from the beginning?" "I was afraid you couldn't accept it. I was reborn not to claim your love, but just to protect you better." He held my face and kissed my lips devoutly. Thank fate that I finally got my love. During the Mid-Autumn Festival family dinner, my father called Asher and me to go home for the festival. He finally chose to forgive. Asher and I moved back home. And Xiao said that my father often stared blankly at my childhood photo album. When he saw us coming back, he still pretended to be indifferent. To make the old man happy, Asher asked someone to make a special set of chess for him so that he could play chess with him. Seeing us carrying a lot of things, the old man said with a show of pride, "You still remember to come back? If I didn't call you, you wouldn't pay any attention to this old man of mine? Do I always have to be the one to speak first?" I immediately gave him a bear hug. "Dad, you're so generous. Don't be mad at us. Here we are." Asher carefully served tea to my father. My father took it and drank a sip, looking very pleased. He had always known that his stepson was ruthless and had never taken him seriously. In the past, not to mention serving tea, he couldn't even expect Asher to pour him a glass of water. Aunt Zhao cooked a lot of my favorite dishes herself. Asher saw this and joked. The family status in our house is clear at a glance from now on. Aunt Zhao scolded him. What are you talking about? You brat. Eat your meal properly. After that, she tapped his head with chopsticks. Wife. Save me. Asher quickly hid behind me. Aunt Zhao couldn't catch him and winked at my father. You brat. You have a wife. But don't I have a boyfriend? My father couldn't help laughing when he heard this and reached out to hold Aunt Zhao. You're getting old. Don't fool around with the kids. Since Aunt Zhao came to the Scarlet family, this was the first time the whole family got together and laughed heartily. After dinner, Asher accompanied my father to play chess in the garden. Aunt Zhao called me into the room and solemnly gave me a green velvet jewelry box. Inside was a bright green jade bracelet. She took it out and put it on for me. Scarlet. This was given to me by Asher's grandmother. Now I'm passing it on to you. Thank you for being willing to accompany Asher for the rest of his life. As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes. I suddenly thought of my mother who passed away from a serious illness when I was 12. My father had never been with another woman since then. Aunt Zhao was the wife of my father's friend. That's why I was so resistant when Aunt Zhao and Asher came to the Scarlet family. I misunderstood her relationship with my father. I felt betrayed and hated her and Asher. Thinking about it now, I really shouldn't have. I hugged her to comfort her. Aunt Zhao, I've always regarded you as family. I hope you can be happy. My father retired and gave me all his shares. I seriously suspect he just wants to be lazy. But I have no evidence. At first, he planned to give the shares to Asher. But Asher refused decisively. Asher had his own plans. In less than 3 years, he used his connections to create his own business empire Xingyu Group, becoming a top-tier tycoon that the powerful and wealthy in Zhongcheng could only look up to. Of course, under my management, the Lu Corporation also became a leading enterprise in the industry. Recently, the Lu Corporation needed to win the order from Xingyu. The competition was too fierce, so I had to ask Asher for special treatment. So, that night, I put on the clothes Asher liked the most and sat obediently by the bed waiting for him. Asher. As soon as Asher finished taking a bath, I pounced on him, not giving him a chance to react at all. Wife. Are you up to something with this unusual initiative tonight? Asher was really smart. As soon as I pounced on him, he pushed me away and looked at me with full alertness. How could that be? I tried to make my smile look as sincere as possible, and moved closer to him step by step. Wife. Don't come closer. You're making it hard for me to control myself. Asher said as he stepped back 2 steps. That's exactly what I want. I grinned wickedly and shook the rabbit ears and tail. Tell me. What do you want to do? Guess. I leaned into his arms. His Adam's apple bobbed, and his eyes became deep and dark. Scarlet. You're tempting me to commit a crime. I gave him a charming smile. Yeah. I'm tempting you. When I woke up, I was sleeping on the cloth sofa in the rental house. You bad guy. I was so exhausted that my body went limp from his tossing. Taking advantage of the break when he was resting, I handed him the contract. Dear husband. Sign this. Please. Asher raised his eyebrows. One more time and I'll sign. So. He bent down towards me again. It was almost dawn before he finally let me go, satisfied, and signed the contract with a big stroke. I secretly sighed, this sacrifice is too great. I can't do this special treatment thing next time. He, however, grinned wickedly. If you want to play the under-the-table deal game next time, remember to come to me. The end.